So the South Texas sand sheet, and this is going to be reminiscent of an old school slideshow. And I like to tell stories, so I'm just going to tell you a little story about the last year or so and what's happened. And I'm going to let some of the pictures do the talking because the sunsets are incredible. And most of these, it's about 50-50 with cell phone images and my good camera. But what is the South Texas sand sheet? Way back when I started trying to figure this out, we didn't have the University of Texas RGV CHAPS program, their historical program and archaeological program. And now there's all kinds of interesting things you can find on the web. And, oh, I did it. So this is the College of Liberal Arts, and I accessed this on March 5th. Their Ancient Landscapes of South Texas. They have information on the South Texas sand sheet. But you just have to see this, the red sandy soil. They have a really cool soil map you can access. So this reddish, dark red area, that's the sand sheet. And out here is the Gulf. This is going west. Underneath the red sandy soil, there's a base of calcium carbonate, or what we call caliche. And this is a little erosion spot that I like to watch and learn about hydrology. And then correspondingly, I learn about building dams to hold the water back. But the lay of the land is really interesting. And you either love it or you hate it. My Nana absolutely hated this red dirt. Every time I gave her a native cactus with it, she said, that's so depressing. But to me, it's the most beautiful thing, this red soil. Back when I was first trying to figure all this out, this gentleman, Mr. William Carr, out of the Nature Conservancy of Texas, I always go back to this on the web. And a little bit more about it. It is the South Texas sand sheet is that little thing, that's Kennedy and Brooks County and the northern tips of Willacy, Hidalgo, and Starr counties. It's also known as the coastal sand plain and the Llano Misteño, which ironically or not, I did not know this when I picked the name for my ranch and arboretum to be El Misteño Ranch. So it's one of these little ironies in my story about this. It's more than 2 million acres, and it's a sheet of Aeolian sand blown inland from the Gulf of Mexico in Holocene times. And I Googled Aeolian. It just means produced by the wind, moved by the wind. And it is, on my little piece of property, it's got what we call the Tamaulipan thorn scrub, or one of our forests that we have here in the valley, a thorn forest, which is endangered because of habitat loss. And the flora on the South Texas sand sheet is really incredible. So we have the heartleaf hibiscus, prickly pear, and my favorite blooms are the cacti blooms, the pencil cactus, the horse crippler, the twisted rib, horse crippler, the beginnings of a beautiful pencil cactus, the pencil cactus. This slide is from my grandma Smith. This was her favorite cactus, and as a little girl, I remember this in coffee cans on her back porch. More cactus. As far as phenology is concerned, what blooms first is usually this little guy right here. The fish hooks, they bloom anywhere from late December to January. And whenever I see the fish hooks blooming, I start looking for little native bees, and I start asking myself, is this it? Is spring coming on? They're one of the things that I look for. And the horse crippler cactus, they're just exquisite. The feathering on the petals, they're quite spectacular. On the sand sheet, we do have a specialty. It's called Echinocereus papilosus variety Angusticeps. Gusticeps, yes, I said that right. This is a very inconspicuous looking little yellowish flowering cactus that looks like a lot of other ones out there, but it's not. And everything so far that you've seen is in Ken and Dr. Al's book. I have gone to great lengths to protect this because the javelina love to eat it. So I have built little cages and put them in prisons to proceed production and to allow them to be able to grow and prosper. So right now, these items are starting to bloom. The cactus, the pin cushions are blooming. Here is another picture of the fish hooks. And this is actually a color that I've not seen on the sand sheet with regard to prickly pear. This is something my cousin and his husband gave me from the Harlingen coastal area, but it's absolutely gorgeous. I saw this and I just kind of got tickled because when I was doing chores one day, a wild olive flower had fallen on the prickly pear, just perfect. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. I kind of like that. And you know what is pretty? But I always have my cell phone handy and now my little tiny binoculars and my camera in tow wherever I'm going, trying to document what's happening. So I thought that was kind of cute. And I am so fascinated by details. One of my favorite flowers is this right here, the purple pleat leaf. And I like what Miss Christina says about it, that it's a common flower, but not commonly seen. And from one day to the next, these can just appear and you will just stop in your tracks and kneel down or lay down and you'll just want to look at this flower. It is so intricate and detailed. It's called the purple pleat leaf. Forest mint, partridge pea, Barbados cherry, Cremeria, shrubby blue sage, desert lantana. The variety, the reason my OCD was real bad doing this, trying to line up all these slides, I went in a few rabbit holes. What I wanted to show you is that there is quite a variety of life happening out there. It's not just a sheet of sand. I have found two different passion flower vines, the Passiflora fetida, and then last year I was so happy to find the Passiflora tineloba, and it was right in front of my very eyes. And then I love the nature story of the Gulf fritillaries using it for food. More blooms. The baby bonnets are exquisite also. I walked by this little tree shrub for probably 10 years and I didn't find this until about 4 years ago when I happened to be out there and it was covered in blooms. And I did one of these like, what is that? And the irony of the thorn thicket is that it is so diverse and everything looks the same. What I've had to do is really start to train my eye to look at the details of flowers, petals, although I still haven't memorized all the front pages in the book about the petioles and all that. It's on the to-do list. The other thing that I do to try to remember things is I come up with funny mnemonic devices, and don't cringe, Ken, but when I was trying to learn this little plant, which actually this bloom I've turned right side up, it actually hangs down like little candy corns, and it's a Hermania texana. But to try to remember that, I started calling it the Herman Munster plant. So when I first started, I thought I'm never going to learn all this stuff. I'm not even going to learn 10% of it. But with repetition and coming to the Native Plant Projects and surrounding myself with people that know a lot more than I do, I'm making progress. These are some of the things that I found that are new to me this year. There is this little toad flax. I had not seen this before. And lo and behold, now it's popped up on the sand sheet. This is, Tasajillo. This is the Huizachillo. But I have to tell you about a little nature story between this pod and the yucca flower. So that little pod I found at the base of the yucca flower after it had been pollinated and was all the pods started dropping. And I knew that it was pollinated by a yucca moth. And I'm not really sure how the larvae get inside, but I know that they're in there because I dissected one time and then I felt bad. I found out the process in reverse by cutting one open. And down here on the bottom, what they do, it's kind of like their little happy meal. They use all the food and the nutrients inside, and they chew their way out, and then they escape out their the little escape hatch. So this is a yucca pod that actually showed several little holes where they made it out. And I was like, wow, that is really cool. Very cool. The other little plant that I just love is the Aristolochia erecta, the swan flower. And how I found out about this plant was I drove in one day and I thought, who threw like these orange gum wrappers out? What's going on? It turned out that it was the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar. So I stopped and got out on my hands and knees and found the little flower. And so I'm always looking for those relationships between the flora and the fauna and how everything is related. This little vine up here was a new surprise last year. It's a globeberry vine. I never knew I had it. I walked by the one pathway and I saw a little speck of yellow like right about here. And I was like, wait, there's something yellow. What is that? And it was this little globeberry. The other cool nature story that's unfolding, and I'm hoping this year will be the third year in a row, is this is an American bumblebee on cowpin daisy. And that cowpin daisy is right here where the water trough overflows for my animals. So it gets water when everything else doesn't. So 2 years ago, I saw a big fuzzy bee out of the corner of my eye, and I thought it was a carpenter bee, but it turned out to be a bumblebee, and I was so excited. Well, last year, it showed up at about the same time in the same area. So I'm hoping this year will be the third year in a row. It showed up about the first week of April. And the cowpins are blooming, so the food is ready and waiting for them. There's all kinds of legumes and native fruits, persimmon, and the shrubby blue sage just supports a lot of plants and wildlife. I mean, excuse me, a lot of wildlife and pollinators and stuff. And the more I learn about this, the more I wish this was something that our native plant growers were growing so that we as the general public could buy this. I haven't had real luck trying to dig this up. The other cool thing, and Miss Westervelt has written some cool articles about the different lichen that are out there. There can be a whole little micro universe of several different kinds of this on just one dead twig. And then this year, for the first time, by a water trough, I saw this little tiny green mold shoot up all of these little spore looking things. Okay. So that was really cool, that little green mold. And then there's been some cool mushrooms pop up this year at different times with a good rain that might be over half an inch. And I know nothing about them except they're cool and there's a lot of different varieties out there. I'm learning more about butterflies thanks to Kat. And here's last year's picture of the American bumblebee. And the first monarch showed up, well, that I saw this past year at my place. I was really excited about that. Here's a few other nature stories. So I found this tarantula hawk already deceased, and I brought it home and looked at it under my microscope, and I learned that the female, their little antennae are curly. And so I've actually seen the nature story happen where a tarantula has been paralyzed and is drug off into a hole. I've actually gotten to see that 3 times, but I've never gotten to see one of these up close. So that was really interesting. This is another interesting nature story. A few years ago, looking for native bees, this happens to be a Protaxia gloriosa, which is not a very common bee, and it's in a death grip with a lynx spider. It was just, wow, okay, that's interesting. The other thing that I love are the plant-animal corresponding relationships. So this is a globe mallow, and this is the specific globe mallow bee that populates the globe mallow. So what it's interesting is to have book knowledge of something, or you hear people talking about something, and then when you actually see those partnerships happening in nature, when the plant is there and you see the animal or the insect come, it's a really satisfying thing and a very positive thing. And it also speaks to the importance of having the diversity of these species in our yards or in geographical areas that are close for the animals to come. This I took 1,000 pictures of that tiny, tiny praying mantis. Do you see that little praying mantis back there? I could never get it in focus. I just gave up. But it was there hanging out on the baby bonnets. And this bee was so funny. I thought it was dead. It didn't move for the longest time. And I guess it was just sleeping because eventually it kind of woke up and buzzed off. And I have read in the literature that they can sleep in flowers overnight. So to actually see that was kind of cool. So there's other bees, and there's a robber fly on a daisy in the center, and another butterfly, which escapes me the name right there on that prickly pear. And the native ground bee nests, I have to tell y'all about these. They're very fascinating, and they look like turrets, or they can look like a perfect pencil hole in the ground with just a little bit of fine dust around it. And native bees are, except for bumblebees, which make their nests kind of on the ground or in debris, they're ground nesters, and they don't nest together in big batches in the same nest like a honeybee does. So whenever I see these nests coming on, then I know, okay, the native bees are about to come out, and the relationship between plants blooming, for example, a prickly pear, and the specific native bees that like and pollinate the prickly pear, among others, they're there. The blooms are about to open, and now I see all the ground bee nests coming on. And so it's interesting to watch how cyclically these patterns continue. And again, the nature stories. I love being out on the sand sheet at night. This is a snip from one of my trail camera videos of an eastern screech owl. And this is a southwestern trapdoor spider that graced us with its presence last July. And a sphinx moth, and is this a checker spot? What is this cat? A border patch. See, I'm not even gonna try to pretend that I know these things, but I love the nature stories. So the brown tarantula, the first time I saw this rainbow scarab, I stopped in my tracks. I was like, whoa, that's cool. And this is the male, and look at that little rhinoceros looking horn it has. These are so beautiful. And there's another, I had to put the bumblebee in again. And another image of, oh, that lynx spider. They're such hunters. I was on a mission to find out what would pollinate the coma tree. I've been following it for 2 years. I had to pare down a lot on this because I didn't want to have 100 slides. We could be here for days, and I want to be respectful of your time. But I had a personal mission to find out what was pollinating this. So 2 years ago, I got this not very good picture of what is obviously a longhorn bee because the antennae are very long. So this year I solved the mystery. And don't ask me the name of it. I can't tell you right now, but I actually took one home and photographed it, lost it in the house, was crying and freaked out that I had done this horrible thing. It was stuck in some papers on my table. So I caught him and put him back in with his flowers and took him back the next day. He was only gone like 18 hours. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. It was an interesting experience, but I solved the mystery. And then there was this cute little spider and more bees. And I have to tell y'all about this big guy up here. We nicknamed him Lurch. I got into a rabbit hole of mothing last year, and I'm going to tell y'all about that in the heat of the summer. And Lurch would come out almost on cue for about 3 or 4 mothing nights in a row over a period of about 10 days. And he just hung out by the moth sheets waiting for other things to come. We like did all this work for him. And we were careful, we didn't step on him. And he came out consistently. And then here's another picture of the monarch. And then, I don't know, Bob, that's just one of my favorites. That's a snip from a trail cam video as well. Oh my goodness. And the Texas tortoise and the tuna, right? Everybody wants a picture where they've got the little stained mouth. Well, I got one last year with my cell phone right here. And this cute little coach whip posed for me for like 30 minutes. And I am afraid of snakes, but I just thought it was cute. They're just perfectly motionless. And this is a tiny frog that was about the size of a nickel. And I found this cleaning out the horse corral one summer where the water trough had overflowed. And then this is our little pal. What do you call him? No, Mr. No Shoulders. This is a Western Diamondback. And they're very beautiful. They're also out there. Here's another picture of Bob or Bobette, not sure. And then the nights, oh, I love to be out there with my little free, apps to look at the stars in the sky. And oh, I did it. It was, hold on a sec. Sorry, guys, I did that again. This, there we go, is a little snip of an American badger. I've seen the badger maybe 5 times on trail cam, like ever. And this past 18 months, he or she made many appearances in about a month's time. And they're just very interesting. They're so pretty. And then the bottom is another little eastern screech owl. So if you want to go down any more little rabbit holes on trail cam videos or anything like that, nature stories, oh my goodness, the bronze cowbird put on a show, hovering above this, doing this little helicopter dance, probably for 30 minutes. I got like 30 really good videos of this little guy just hovering. And it's so funny because she looks at him and she walks off, and then he hovers again and she's like, whatever. And so I took a snip of that because I actually uploaded that to YouTube, because it has that bird moving its wings has what's called a stroboscopic effect. So it's like you hear it, you think you're like in an old school movie, and you can see the white in between the wings. So it almost looks fake, but that is such an interesting dance of the male bronze cowbird. And then I am enamored with raptors. So this is a little female juvenile Harris's hawk I nicknamed Liberty from last year. And that she's staring at me, looking on the corral panels where I pin up my animals sometimes. So again, if you want to look at anything else about that, you can visit my website. The last 12 months were the hottest on record. I kept saving my news clippings and so forth. I subscribed to NOAA because I'm working on a journal for native bees that I'll probably finish up at the end of this summer from last summer. And so I started trying to take data and keep snippets and things. And you didn't have to tell any of us that, right? We lived through it. Last year, I went out to check on my animals every day for about 70 days straight in the heat of it. And it took a toll. Here, this is over 100 in the shade on the porch out there. It was not only hot, but it was dry. And that was very stressful. The prickly pear were blooming. I was concerned I would lose my prickly pear tuna crop, and then the animals wouldn't have tunas and I wouldn't have a little to make jelly. And that's my cheeky little donkey. Precipitation totals were disconcerting. It was, as the summer wore on, there were secondary effects that I ended up dealing with regard to my watering hole and plant life, because the heat and the drought were just, the cumulative effects became quite a lot. And I checked my rain gauge old school, just like my grandpa. And in June, there were only 3 days with measurable rain. And I already added it up for us. It's 3 6/10. So just a little over 3.5 inches in June. Not great, but not bad. July, only 1/2 inch. July 6th, that was it. August, the 22nd, we were already over 50 days of over 100, only 0.8 of an inch. And although the sunsets were still beautiful, my watering hole took a big hit. Every so often, I have to rework the bentonite liner in there for it to maintain integrity and hold water. And that's a rabbit hole y'all really don't want to know about. But it got to be that the watering hole would not hold water in a 24-hour period. It would be completely gone. And I needed to add more material to it and rework it. This little crude orange circle is how big it used to be in 2012. I used to ride my horse and pretend I was Elizabeth Taylor and splashing through here. And right there, just where this pink dot is, that's what it had been reduced to. So it was time to rework the watering hole. And then there was the plague of these arthropods. My goodness, And I checked with all my ranching friends. These insects were fouling up water troughs all in the South Texas sand sheet, making it difficult for cattle, for birds, for animals. And actually, I was so tired, I never stopped to take a picture, but usually every square inch of any water surface was completely covered in a trough with these things. And they made a sludge and they smelled and it was disgusting. So about midway through the summer, I had to drain all of those tanks and refill them with fresh water because the smell was so off-putting that my livestock wouldn't drink out of it anymore. So this was also happening. And despite all of it, yeah, my tuna crop was lost. I learned how to make jelly from Carol Goolsby back in a demonstration at Quinta Mazatlan a gazillion years ago. And it's one of my favorite things to do and share. And I like to save chile de monte and make a little bit picoso version with a little bit spice. So I'm determined this year, no matter what happens, to keep enough prickly pear watered somewhere close to the house, to the hose, that I can make jelly again. And I do have the recipe, and I've gone through all the steps as best as I could, if you're interested in that. And despite even the heat of the summer, as the sunset would go down and that beautiful dusk period, it's magical. Even if it's been 120 all day, it can cool down ultimately at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning to get kind of chilly. It is a desert. That's what's so cool. I didn't really realize this is a desert. It's really a desert. Night skies are incredible. And the dark skies comfort me. There's nothing like being out there and then hearing the Paraki call. It's like, oh, okay, this is great. And this is an overlay of one of the little free stargazing apps that I use to try to orient myself in the night sky and see what's going on. I was on my way out one night and it was just so beautiful. I had to stop and take a picture. So that's actually the ambient light from my truck lights. And this is just a cheesy cell phone picture. But you can get the idea that when it is pretty dark skies out there, and when the clouds are gone and we don't have a full moon, you can see some pretty incredible things. Which leads me to one of the rabbit holes I went into. Was on my life list. I had to have a moth night. I wanted to learn about moths, mothing, you name it. So my friend Kat helped me out. And this was during Moth Week, July 30th, 22nd through 30th. So I went down the rabbit hole of how to make it, how to set it up, and I wrote about it, and it's on the website. But I got a little certificate. We did that night. Yay. We had to go all out, Kat and her cool ideas. We have made it fun. And we saw some cool things. This mantid fly is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. I didn't even know they existed. And then I got the bright idea to make pyramids. So I covered ladders with sheets and then we underlit them with ultraviolet light. So we had fun learning about moths. This is interesting. I don't remember the name, but the red velvet ant, there's a female and this is the male. The male has the antenna. And this was something that I learned that night that I didn't know about. I also learned from Mr. Drew Benny right before we had our event out at the South Texas Ecotourism Center that lichen fluoresces under ultraviolet light, and so does mesquite sap. So if y'all get bored, get yourself a little flashlight and go check this out. It's really cool. And the Huebner's olive moth. Kat thought that was a good find and that I should include it, so I did. And here, you know, all the contraptions and different ways of lighting. Now this is not one of my X-ray images. I have to tell y'all, one of the other bucket list items when I first went through the Master Naturalist program, I got it in my head that I wanted to have a Perseid meteor shower watching event. And it just never happened, and it never happened. And last year, for me personally, it was a very pivotal year in almost every aspect of my life. And I decided that those were all signs that I needed to quit waiting to do these things. I needed to do them. So I had some friends out. The skies were pitch black. and I practiced with my Nikon on how to set it to do its own time-lapse videography, so I didn't have to try to hold anything still. And I actually captured a few just zipping by. And so, of course, it was too dark for y'all to see, but I had to still tell y'all about it. So I flipped all the images and did all this silly stuff in this photo editing, so you could see that if you were seeing this in real time, it would be all black and you would be like, whoop, and that was it. It would be gone. So I freeze framed it because we saw so many falling that night. It was so amazing. It was really incredible. So that also happened on the sand sheet. That was something I wanted to do. And then the annular solar eclipse, which, yes, I know everybody's running to the hill country. I'm not. I decided to do my own little citizen science project through something called Soundscapes. It's partnered up with NASA. Anyway, I was out there with my temperature, my rate, my wind gauge, my barometer. I was taking data in 15-minute increments from 11 to 2. And I took all the coyotes were howling all morning. And at the max peak, and it was cloudy. And in one of the videos, which they were too hard to load, so I didn't do that, we could see actually the eclipse. We could see it. It peeked through for just a second. But what was more mind-blowing was in those minutes right before and after, we were standing facing the northwest, and then we finally just were facing due east. And all of a sudden, I see turkey vultures coming up from behind me. So I turn and I look, and you can see 2 kettles of hundreds, each kettle of turkey vultures. And they were flying fairly low, and they were coming from the northwest, and they were going to the southeast. And we had just had a cool front that morning. There was like 0.2 of an inch in the rain gauge. And they kept coming, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. And we stopped counting at 8 kettles of turkey vultures. There were easily over 1,000 that were migrating or whatever. They were flying somewhere during that time. And that was pretty cool. But of course, I did not use these fancy glasses to look at the sun. I was too freaked out. I'm just a nervous ninny. I didn't want to do that. But I also didn't get any good pictures of like the eclipse through a colander or all these funny things. So I have a do-over in a couple of weeks. So if you want to go out there and check it out, let me know. I'm going to be out there. Oh my goodness. So right now, I did not know about blue curls. Did y'all know about blue curls? Oh my goodness. This is the most exquisite little flower that starts out like a spiral, and then as it unfurls up like a flag, that's where all the little flowers get pollinated in the seeds. I'm enamored with this plant. And then we have the mimosa, another plant I learned about this year. Kat taught me. This is the yellow flax. This is new on my place. I'd never seen this before. And the oh my gosh, I just lost this. I know what this is. Nama. The Nama is out like crazy. The population of this year is like 1,000-fold. So what I'm noticing in trends after being out there watching all this stuff really in earnest since 2013 is that it always changes. Don't count your chickens that it's going to stay the same, because you can still get surprises. So we have the lantana. Here's another nature story, that little link spider there, scarlet pea. This is some type of moss thing. Is it the Port Luaca? Chisme. The false dandelion, Indian blanket, of course, the wild olive. These poppies right now, they're pretty incredible. I've been seeing this Gara too, and this I had not ever seen, the square bud daisy, phlox, this cute little flower called smartweed. I mean, it's easy to get into rabbit holes with the microplants. Another of my favorites is the red bud and the brachyzornia. This is, I'm not sure, this is called mala mujer, and you don't want to touch it. I don't know what its other name is, but it looks very beautiful, but it will cause you to have stings and burns. You don't want to touch it. And then bluebonnets came up by my gate this year. They've come and gone over the last few years. And I found some solanum, some nightshade. This was a first find for me this year. And then I did not know what cardinal feather was. That's not a very good picture, but Kat and I went exploring for wildflowers on the side of the road last year, late spring, early summer, and we're starting to do it again. And the cardinal feather and the wine cups and everything come up. And this is, I think this is wood sorrel. And this is just one of my older pictures of the prickly pear. You see how all these blooms are? This year, the prickly pear are loaded. Every pad has, every little square inch of the side has got flowers and tunas. If the conditions stay right, it will be a bumper tuna crop this year for wildlife and for everybody. The thistle, the whitebrush. Whitebrush is another one that a lot of native bees use. This is something I wish that we had more of in native plant nurseries, and we could have more whitebrush in people's yards. I also learned about Romer's acacia this year. This is an interesting mid-sized tree. I don't know, 8-10 feet tall. And I do not remember what this was, but it was a new wildflower that I had never seen that was about 3 feet tall. I know Kat popped it into INAT. This is this beetle. I think this is a blister beetle. Anyway, we have the widow's tears right now. The Cenizo are blooming, and the little tail that goes with that is if the sage is blooming, it's going to rain perhaps. So I don't know. I'm hoping. And then more of the cowpen daisy. Just a good mix right now of flowers on the sand sheet. This is how this right now, if you're driving out there, this is what the roadsides look like. And you can just park and watch out where you're stepping, but you can see all of this from the roadside. Okay, my cochineal caper. So like I said before, I made some homemade paper. I learned how to do that at the South Texas Ecotourism Center, and I sprinkled seeds on it. And I hope none of it's left when we close this place down. It's all over there for y'all to take. And it was on my list to experiment with a cochineal dye. And for some reason, I don't know if it was the heat or the lack of rain, but the cochineal went to town. And if you've never seen what they can do, they're actually used as a biocontrol in Africa because they can take down huge amounts of prickly pear, and you don't have to lift a finger or a machete. You just let them do the work. So there was plenty to collect, and I didn't feel like I was robbing any balance of them in nature. And I created my own nopalry, second year in the pandemic, and I had all these tuna pads hanging on an old hammock string with wire and all this stuff. So I was able to this is a female cochineal. So then I put it under my microscope, and of course I had to put it under black light. So the red inside, that's actually the red dye under UV light under my microscope. I just like looking at details like that. So I went into a rabbit hole on harvesting, on mordants, what to use to make them different colors. Devin came out and joined Kat and I, and she brought us some wonderful honey. And we sat at my grandma's table, and we wrote in our journals and tried different methods of application. I actually just used the solar method of dyeing right here. And I worked on dyeing different fabrics, textiles, yarn. I thought I would learn how to crochet and make something, but I didn't have time for that. So if anybody needs some yarn, I'm done with it. I can't handle it. I'm done with the yarn. I even tried, one of Van Gogh's painting, I think is called The Bedroom. Cochineal was used in the red paint in Van Gogh. So I got it in my head, I'm going to paint something. I never achieved the bright reds because I didn't want to start messing with heavy duty chemicals, but the cochineal consistently produced pinks and purples with either kitchen alum and cream of tartar, just regular over-the-counter cooking spices. I can't believe I finished. That's it. And my timer didn't even go off. I was talking really fast. I still have 5 whole minutes. I really just wanted the images of things to show you what it can be out on the sand sheet and what's out there. It sounds so obscure. And when my dad, when I first started going out to this property, I had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, and I wanted to see, I checked out the property because I was going to ask my dad if I could have permission to move my animals out there so I could save some money because I was going on disability. And he said yes. So that's in 2000. That's what began my journey on the red sandy soil and to this day. So thank you for coming and listening.